Imagine you are a dinosaur living 66 million years ago. You might think you'd be killed directly by that giant rock falling from the sky. But you're wrong. What truly kills your kind is something 10,000 times more terrifying than the impact itself. As a dinosaur, you don't just die once. You experience 3 deaths. The first death takes only 0.1 seconds. The second lasts for 3 days, and the third stretches for 30,000 years. What's most frightening is that in this catastrophe, you don't even get to choose how you die. If you happen to be within 1,000 kilometers of the impact site, you will be vaporized instantly before you can even feel pain. If you are 2,000 kilometers away, your eyeballs will be scorched through by intense light, and then you'll be roasted alive in the darkness. If you are 5,000 kilometers away, you will watch fire rain from the sky, see your companions fall one by one, and finally starve to death in a frozen world where temperatures drop tens of degrees below zero. By the time the last dinosaur dies, the very first to perish has already been gone for tens of thousands of years. This means you are not wiped out in an instant. You are slowly ground away by a period of suffering that lasts for millennia. Today we're going to talk about that 30,000-year slow death. Let's turn the clock back to the Cretaceous period. 66 million years ago, it was one of the most prosperous eras in Earth's history. Back then, Earth had no winter, no polar ice caps, vibrant forests were everywhere, and life flourished across the globe, free, wild, and ancient. You could see herds of triceratops roaming the plains, pterosaurs gliding through the sky, and T-Rex standing at the top of the food chain. It was a cruel world, yet one of perfect balance. But all of this began its countdown the day a rock entered the solar system. It came from beyond Jupiter's orbit, a carbonaceous asteroid. After drifting in space for hundreds of millions of years, it was kicked out by Jupiter's gravity. Then it hurtled at full speed, heading straight for your Earth, 10 kilometers in diameter, equivalent to Mount Everest flying sideways. At 20 kilometers per second, it was 60 times faster than a bullet, and 58 times the speed of sound. From New York to Chicago, it could finish the trip in 1 minute, and at the time, you knew nothing of it. Ankylosaurus moved slowly at the foot of mountains, herds of hadrosaurs crossed rivers, and primitive birds attempted their first flights. The sun was pleasant, the breeze gentle, and life was quiet, eating and drinking as usual. No living creature realized that the god of death had entered Earth's gravitational sphere. 20 minutes before impact, a light appeared on the horizon. At first, it was faint, like a bright star, but it grew larger and brighter, expanding at a visible rate. The colored birds suddenly became agitated, flapping their wings and flying aimlessly. You and your kin stopped in your tracks, craning your necks toward the sky. You felt something, but you didn't understand what it was. 60 seconds before impact, that light was too bright to look at, more blinding than 1,000 suns combined. The entire sky turned deathly white. From hundreds of kilometers away, your eyeballs would be scorched by the intense light. The proteins on your retinas would coagulate instantly, blinding you on the spot. You could see nothing, only feeling an overwhelming heat wave approaching. 3 seconds before impact, the asteroid tore through the atmosphere, dragging a tail of fire longer than the entire sky. The air was violently compressed, temperatures soaring to tens of thousands of degrees. This image lasted less than a blink of an eye, and then, boom. But the word boom is too weak. Human language has no word to describe that moment. The asteroid slammed into the shallow waters of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula at over 70,000 kilometers per hour. The impact released energy equivalent to over 100 trillion tons of TNT exploding at once. This number is too vast, so let me convert it for you. The Tsar Bomba, the largest nuclear bomb humans ever built, had a yield of 50 million tons. In other words, this impact had the power of 2 million Tsar Bombas detonating simultaneously. 0.1 seconds after impact, all life within 500 kilometers evaporated instantly. Note, not burned to death, but evaporated. No bodies, no bones, not even organic molecules remained. But the dinosaurs here were the luckiest, because it takes 0.2 seconds for light to enter the eye and the brain to produce fear. But you only lived for 0.1 seconds, clean, swift, and painless. 1 second after impact, the Earth's crust was torn apart like tofu. A crater 180 kilometers wide and 20 kilometers deep formed instantly. What does that mean? Throw the entire city of New York into it, and it wouldn't even touch the edges. Seawater was vaporized before it could rush in. 330,000 cubic kilometers of rock were blasted 160 kilometers into the sky. These rocks would turn into fire rain over the next few hours and fall back to the ground. 5 seconds after impact, a supersonic shock wave radiated outward. Within 1,000 kilometers, temperatures instantly soared to 1,500 degrees. This means you wouldn't be burned to death. You would be carbonized directly. Skin, muscle, and organs would turn into charcoal in seconds. The poses of some companions were frozen forever, mouths open as if to roar. But before a sound could escape, they had become charred statues. 2 minutes after impact, 1,500 kilometers away, you here saw the white light on the horizon and felt the earth tremble. Before you could even flee, the shockwave arrived. Wind speeds exceeded 1,000 kilometers per h-hour, 100 times more violent than any hurricane. Your 30-ton body was tossed into the air like a toy, internal organs bursting from the sudden change in air pressure. Trees were snapped at the trunk and burst into flames instantly. The air became scorching fire. With one breath, your lungs were cooked. 10 minutes after impact, seismic waves circled the earth several times. Volcanoes worldwide were triggered, lava spewing from cracks in the ground. Massive landslides occurred on the seabed, triggering tsunamis 1,500 meters high. What does that look like? The world's tallest building, the Burj Khalifa, is only 828 meters. A wall of water twice as high as a skyscraper swept everything at 800 kilometers. Per h, dinosaurs along the coast were swept away before they could react. Their bodies washed hundreds of kilometers inland. 30 minutes after impact, the most terrifying thing began. Remember those rock fragments blasted into space? They began falling back. Hundreds of billions of tons of rock circled the Earth and re-entered the atmosphere in an incandescent state. Every fragment was like a small meteor, trailing a tail of flame as it slammed into the ground. This was not a meteor shower, this was fire rain. The entire Earth's sky was ignited, and this fire rain lasted for 3 days and nights. Everything on the surface burned. Forests, plains, and bodies all became fuel. 90% of North America's forests turned to ash within 48 hours. The air was thick with the smell of char and sulfur. The smell of death, visibility dropped to near zero, with smoke and fire everywhere. If you were a dinosaur 5,000 kilometers away, you would see the sky turn red, then black. You would see stars falling one by one, each one igniting a new fireball. You would see companions fall. Some hit, some burned, some suffocated by smoke. You would run everywhere, but you could find nowhere safe, because the entire Earth was burning. Dust kicked up by the impact, smoke from the fires, and sulfur from volcanic eruptions all drifted high into the atmosphere. Like a thick black blanket, it wrapped the entire Earth tight. Sunlight could not penetrate, and Earth turned from a furnace into an icebox. This was your third death, the longest and most desperate. This impact generated over 2 trillion tons of silicate dust, with a diameter of only 0.8 to 8 micrometers. It was just small enough to hang in the atmosphere for 15 years. This dust blocked 99% of the sunlight. The entire planet entered a nuclear winter. Remember, you in the Cretaceous had never experienced winter. Your bodies had no mechanism to handle extreme cold. Those massive bodies now became a fatal flaw. The larger the size, the faster the heat loss, and the more miserable the death. And something even worse was happening. Plants began to die. Ferns, conifers, and flowering plants all became withered corpses. The green oceans that once covered the continents were now a dead gray. The food chain collapsed from the bottom. Earth's food resources were in severe shortage. The first to give in were the herbivores. Giant herbivores like Triceratops and Hadrosaurs needed hundreds of kilograms of plants daily to survive. But now, there was nothing on the ground. You migrated in herds, searching for green, but everywhere led to a dead end. Hunger made you grow weaker, your pace slower, until one by one you fell by the road, becoming the last rations for the carnivores. When the herbivores fell, the end came for the carnivores too. Tyrannosaurus rex, the absolute overlord of the food chain, was now a pathetic creature. They wandered through charred forests looking for anything that still moved. The eyes that once made all things tremble were now filled only with hunger and despair. In the end, they either starved or were killed by their own kind while fighting over rotting meat. The situation in the oceans was equally tragic. Acid rain from the impact sharply changed the ocean's pH. Phytoplankton died en masse, and oxygen in the seawater plummeted. Those ancient giants that ruled the deep sea suffocated one by one, sinking to the bottom to become new fossils. Scientists have found through fossil records that 75% of all species went extinct. All non-avian dinosaurs vanished, including T-Rex, Triceratops, Ankylosaurus, Stegosaurus, and pterosaurs. But even as everything turned to ash, some life survived. In underground burrows, muddy swamps, and rock crevices, some inconspicuous small animals hid. Insects, amphibians, and mammals, no bigger than rats. They hid in the darkness, relying on small stores of food or scavenging rotting plants, and somehow endured this catastrophe. When the dust settled, when sunlight returned, and when the first rain nourished the scorched earth, forgotten seeds began to sprout. Moss crawled over rocks, ferns pushed through ruins, and small flowers bloomed in the new sunlight. Earth breathed again. Those tiny creatures that had waited for 10,000 years in the dark finally stepped out of their caves. They found the world once ruled by your kind, the giants, was now empty. And so they began to multiply, to evolve, and to occupy every empty ecological niche. The world changed forever. The era of reptiles was officially over. The era of mammals had begun. More than 60 million years later, one of them stood up, learned to use tools, learned language, learned to look at the stars and wonder where they came from. That is us, humanity. So you see, your extinction was not just the end of a species, but the beginning of another era without that impact. If your kind had not gone extinct, mammals would never have stood up, and you would not exist today. But the universe is fair. Everything with a beginning has an end. Perhaps one day, our civilization will also end. The sky will darken once more, the tides will change, and stars will burn elsewhere. But just as it was 66 million years ago, life will always find a way.